Hey, New Lifers, welcome to week 1 of the Parenting 101 series and week 6 of Life Groups. Today, I want to talk to you about companionship and intimacy. Companionship and intimacy are keys to healthy relationships, and they are also extremely effective in helping us to be better parents. In church on Sunday, we talked about the story of Jacob and Esau. And I don't have time to tell the whole story, but I'll summarize it by just saying this. Jacob, who eventually became the father of the nation of Israel, Jacob's name was changed to Israel, he tricked his dad Isaac into thinking that he was his brother Esau. And he did that by putting fur over his skin. You see, Esau, Jacob's older brother, was a hairy guy. And he was also the first in the line to receive the birthright from his father Isaac. So Jacob pretended to be Esau to steal from Esau what was rightly his. He put on a costume, and he did it in order to take away the birthright and everything that his father had promised to his firstborn. And did that fulfill him? No. It got him what he thought he wanted. It got him all of the wealth and power that he wanted. But later in the story, we see that that is not all that he actually realized he cared about. He forgot that what he really wanted was all the relationships that he had with his family. All that wealth didn't fulfill him. All he wanted to do was to go back home, to be with his family, even if it meant that he might die. So he took off the costume, went home in hopes of restoring the companionship that he had lost by putting on the costume in the first place. Early in a child's life, if we make any effort at all, it's easy to have companionship and intimacy with your children. But let me show you what inevitably happens to everyone. When we are born, it's just us. It's just self. We are naked and vulnerable. My son isn't ashamed if some total stranger changes his diaper. He doesn't get embarrassed when he trips and falls. There's no shame. But inevitably, something happens to all of us that changes that. Eventually, we experience shame. Maybe we realize our family is poor and on food stamps. Maybe we are rejected by someone we want to be friends with. Maybe we get embarrassed when we peed our pants as a kid or we were left out of a game. So in order to cover that shame, we all learn to wear a costume. And wearing a costume doesn't make us evil. It happens to all of us. And usually your costume is something that makes you feel better about yourself. You may have found a way to make people laugh with you instead of at you, so you learn to be funny. Maybe you realize that you could outsmart people, so you learned how to be smarter than everyone else. Maybe you were naturally strong, so you became a bully or a tough guy. Maybe you hid behind your parents' wealth or your athletic ability. But at a very young age, you learned that this costume would protect you. But you can't have intimacy with a costume. And you can't have intimacy with shame. If you want true intimacy, you have to get past the shame. That's easy when you're a kid and you're young, and it's easier to sustain intimacy than to have to get it after the costume has been put on. In order for a marriage to be a good marriage, the husband has to get to know the wife's self. And the wife has to get to know the husband for who he really is. But that's really hard. It's hard to take off the costume because that requires us to be vulnerable. When I take off my costume in front of you, I have to have a tremendous amount of faith in you. I have to trust you, and you can ruin that trust by being judgmental. You can ruin that trust by telling someone else what you saw when you saw me in my vulnerable state. Or you can reaffirm that trust through grace and through forgiveness and through unconditional love. We have this same choice as parents. As parents, we can show our kids that they can trust us when they come to us after they screw up. We can show our kids that we love them no matter what. And that doesn't mean we condone all their bad behavior, but we do not define them by their bad behavior. Our priority is to love them unconditionally. And that is the only way we will ever be able to have lasting intimacy and companionship with our kids. So stop here, answer the first 2 questions, and then push play. We all know that it's not good for man to be alone. We were all created for the purpose of companionship. And that's not just because we need to have someone there for you when you need help. At the core of who we are, intimacy, companionship, and relationship are necessary for life. When God said in Genesis 2:18, "It is not good for the man to be alone. I will make a helper suitable for him." And God wasn't saying this because Adam needed someone to bail him out or to help him. In fact, God knew that Eve would eventually bring sin into the world. God said it wasn't good for man to be alone, even while man lived in a perfect world. When Adam was alone in the world, he had no problems. There was no death, no fear, no suffering. Adam didn't even have to pay taxes. And no one was around to nag him. He lived in a perfect world. But even when everything was perfect, it was not good for man to live alone. Why? Because we need relationships if we ever want to become who we were created to be. If your kids have any hope of becoming who they were meant to be, they need your companionship. You have wisdom to share with them, but they will never learn all that they can from you if you betray their trust or if you lose intimacy with them. After Eve sinned and then Adam sinned in the garden, what did God say to them when he confronted them for sinning? God said in Genesis 3:11, "Who told you you were naked?" In other words, God is saying, why would you need to put on a costume? Adam and Eve were the only people to physically walk with God on this earth. And I have a theory about why the Bible puts such an emphasis on Adam and Eve's nakedness. I think we're being taught that the intimacy and companionship that is being given by their heavenly Father to Adam and Eve removes all need for fear and removes all need for shame. They were being so fulfilled by God's unconditional love for them that they had no reason to be ashamed. We are never going to be able to give that level of confidence to our kids like God did, but we can learn to use unconditional love to give our kids confidence that the world will try to take away from them for the rest of their lives. Similarly, God isn't impressed with our costume. We are God's children. But he can only help us if we humble ourselves before him, if we give ourselves to him. He can only help us to grow and mature if we become intimate with him. And the great news is that we can trust him because he loves us unconditionally. He will never leave us, and he will never forsake us. We have no reason to fake it with God. He wants what's best for us, and we can never have what is best for us unless we have intimacy with him. If you haven't experienced that intimacy and companionship with your Heavenly Father, you are missing something incredible. Maybe it's time for you to get vulnerable with him. Maybe you're wearing a costume that has built a wall between you and God. Take it off. This is why I raise my hands when I'm singing to God in worship on Sundays. It's actually something that makes me feel quite awkward. Naturally, I think it's a little bit cheesy, but I do it because for me, it is a way of saying, here I am, God. I'm all yours. Do with me whatever you think is best. You can do it in the way you humble yourself in your prayers. You can do it by being proud of your relationship with God in front of your friends. But however you need to do it, get vulnerable with your Heavenly Father who loves you unconditionally. Stop here and answer the last 3 questions, and I'll see you Sunday in church.